Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. We've made it all the way to the episode number 40. Episode 40 of Jimmy at the Crossroads. We'll be live in moments. Stay tuned.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got? Policy and markets, elections, current events. The broadcast master shows us how to win. I said, policy and markets, elections and current events. The broadcast master shows us how to win. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Hello, my friends, and welcome.
Gonna
to
talk
Jimmy
markets,
at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger,
politics,
your host for the program, coming in partnership with the Washington Examiner on this Monday, May 11th, 2020. Great to be with you. Thanks so much for joining us, being a part of the program. I've got a lot on my mind today, so we're going to spend some time with yours truly, offering commentary on a couple big news items of the day. We will also be joined in the third segment of the show by Crista Huff, Chief Analyst at Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor, who's coming back on to talk about the stock market as well as something to keep in mind for boomers and the housing market. Okay, boomers, you got to listen up to what's going on when it comes to housing moving forward. Very interesting discussion to come with Crista Huff as well as with August Turek, who is the author of an interesting book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, One CEO's Quest for Meaning and Authenticity, as well as Brother John, a monk, a pilgrim, and the purpose of life. Entrepreneur August Turek will join us to talk about lessons that the Trappist monks, which is an order of the Catholic Church, what they can teach us about business, and especially during this crisis. I'm looking forward to having what should be a very interesting conversation with August Turek. But first, let's talk a little bit about the economy right now. The economy amidst the coronavirus pandemic and what is happening. The reality is stark economically. We saw a jobs report on Friday. 20.5 million jobs lost just in the last period, and millions of jobs lost since then. Not only that, but the labor force participation rate is at its lowest level since 1973. That means the number of people in the workforce looking for work or working, either or, not just working, but looking for work, is at its lowest level since 1973, when women were just starting to get more heavily involved in the workforce. That is stunning. And it is an exemplification of the economic turmoil we are in now that must be reversed. We must reopen the economy. Yesterday on Fox News Sunday, in Cut 8, Steve Mnuchin was pressed on the unemployment numbers, and how terrible they are. The official unemployment rate, which doesn't include a heck of a lot of people working, about 14.7%. And the number could be, in reality, closer to a full quarter of the economy. Take a look.
Bureau of Labor Statistics says what they call the real unemployment number for April, which again includes people who are not looking for work or underemployed, is 22.8%. But again, that does not include, because the unemployment numbers for April stopped in mid-April, does not include the 7 million people who have lost their jobs since then. So aren't we talking close to 25% at this point, which is Great Depression neighborhood?
Chris, we could be, but let me just emphasize, unlike the Great Depression, where you had economic issues that led to this, we closed down the economy. So it wouldn't be a surprise if you closed down the economy that in half of the workforce is half the people didn't work. And that's why we're very focused on rebuilding this economy and getting it back to where it was. This is no fault of American business. This is no fault of American workers. This is a result of a virus. And that's why the president and I were determined to put together the largest economic program ever to help American workers get through this. So you are correct. The reported numbers are probably going to get worse before they get better. But that's why we're focused on rebuilding this economy. We'll have a better third quarter. We'll have a better fourth quarter. And next year is going to be a great year.
He's absolutely right that this is no fault of American business, what we're facing right now. It's the result of two things. One, he identified a virus, which is true, the coronavirus, and the turmoil that has brought about. But also, he didn't include this point, which is government. Because of the virus, governments made a determination to shut down the economy, including many businesses that could otherwise be operative. The economic turmoil we're facing right now, seems to be my phrase of the day, economic turmoil, is a result primarily of government shutting down the economy in an effort to stop the spread of this virus, and it is of dubious effect. I do not believe that there is sufficient evidence to demonstrate clearly and without any noticeable doubt, because I think there's a heck of a lot of doubt, that this policy of shutting things down really worked or that it would continue to work moving forward. We've never tried this sort of thing before, and there's a reason why. There are a number of reasons why, in fact, including the untold damage to the economy. The virus would have taken a toll no matter what, but it's amplified significantly because of government policies, government shutdowns. In cut 9, Steve Mnuchin, again, Treasury Secretary, warns of permanent economic damage if we do not get the economy reopened. He's right about that. Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday yesterday began this portion of their interview by playing a clip from a leader of the Federal Reserve.
But Patrick Harker, head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, says if the economy opens too soon and the virus spikes again, quote, not only would this be a health catastrophe, but it would reverse the recovery as well. If that happens, he predicts, quote, a painful economic contraction of GDP in 2021 as shutdowns are reintroduced. Do you agree that there is a considerable risk, not to say you shouldn't do it, but there is a considerable risk to reopening both from a public health and an economic standpoint?
Chris, if we do this carefully, working with the governors, I don't think there's a considerable risk. Matter of fact, I think there's a considerable risk of not reopening. You're talking about what would be permanent economic damage to the American public, and we're going to reopen in a very thoughtful way that gets people back to work safely, that has them social distance. One of the things we've seen, Chris, is a lot of businesses can do telework. Not everybody has to come back into the office at the same time, but people will be able to go into stores. Some of them will have reservations when they go in, but businesses will be able to reopen. And I think, as you know, certain parts of the country had very devastating impacts, like New York, and certain parts of the country didn't. And this is all being monitored very, very carefully.
Permanent economic damage. He's right. Steve Mnuchin, beyond dispute, is right. Because what you're doing is setting up for long, lasting difficulties for this economy to get back on its feet the longer this lasts. If we can get things reopened more and more, several states are doing so already, including California, finally starting on a track loosely to reopen. If we can do that, then we can keep the economic damage in check. We can start to bring about an economic recovery. But if we do not, then we will see permanent economic damage. I get the point from that leader of the Federal Reserve who was suggesting, you know, we really should keep things shut down longer, otherwise the economic damage is going to be even more pronounced. I get what he's saying, sort of, but not really. Because while I understand his point that we are going to see more economic challenges in the future, even if we reopen, of course we will, because the virus isn't going to go away like that. That does not mean that shutting down the economy indefinitely is going to be better. By no stretch of the imagination is keeping economic activity suppressed for a long period of time going to be better for bounce back potential than reopening is. Because what you're doing by suppressing economic activity for the long term, you are keeping the flow of dollars out of the economy. You're relying upon the government to basically borrow money at this point. The federal government is borrowing $3 trillion of new debt. That is not wealth creation. That is sort of pulling money out of thin air. You might remember the novel The Giving Tree. I'm thinking about the money tree right now. That seems to be where the federal government's looking to get their money from. And it's absurd, patently absurd, to think that the government can just be there and provide. But that is what some of the elite economists at the Federal Reserve believe. Oh, we are all-knowing and all-powerful. We are extremely prescient. In fact, we are omniprescient. And you should trust us because we're at the Federal Reserve. And we're giving advice that you just keep things shut down and we will boost back through Federal Reserve policies. Dumb. Incomprehensibly dumb for a noted leader of a prominent economic institution in the United States to basically say we keep things shut down, at some point the government could just step in and fix it, because that's what he's implying. That the government can keep things on ice and just pay people. And it is ludicrous. This idea of modern monetary theory, let's just keep printing the money, is ludicrous. But that is the philosophy of the elite that trust that they know better than you do how to run your life. The elite that trust that they know how to run the economy better than the private market. Let's be real about something. Let's keep it real here about the fact that we won a Cold War against a regime that believed in central planning. I was born in 1990, basically didn't live during the Cold War. The Soviet Union was about to collapse within a year after I was born. And the reality here is that what we're seeing right now are many politicians and elite economists at places like the Federal Reserve suggesting that central planning is the way to go right now. No, they're not necessarily saying forever, but they're saying indefinitely, until we think we've got to grapple on this. That guy at the Fed is essentially saying the same thing as Zeke Emanuel, who was saying we need 18 months to get a handle on this thing. The governor of Georgia put out a tweet highlighting that he's had fewer deaths in his state since reopening than they began the numbers. He had a day that brought things down to the lowest level since they began tallying. That shows that the idea that reopening is simply going to lead to chaos and death doesn't fit. And the data already doesn't show conclusively that shutting down in the first place was the right thing to do. People's lives are being destroyed. More and more data coming out about the mental health aspects of this. Mental health issues do not go away, and they can become more and more serious over time. People can't discount that. You can't discount the physical abuse that may be happening to children in their homes who are not being reported because, say, a teacher's not catching that something's awry at home. And now those kids are captors in their homes, potentially being abused even more because their parents can't tolerate being around a kid all day. It's worth it to reopen. You do what my dad calls the Ben Franklin analysis, looking at the costs and the benefits. And the costs of this shutdown and perpetuating it far outweigh the benefits. Because we're not just talking about loss of life, raw data of numbers of loss of life, but we are also talking about the loss of lives in real time for years and years to come. What is being lost to people who are still alive, but their lives are being stripped away. Their livelihoods may be adding to stress or other issues. Got to get things reopened, folks. All right, we're going to take a break here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the saga of Michael Flynn reaching new heights over the weekend with the discovery of, well, not discovery, release of new audio tape of President Obama, the former president of the United States, having the audacity to talk about the rule of law being violated. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Keep it right here. It's Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner.
Fake cartoons. I'm gonna do the jumble. Who is it? What do you want?
It's me, Donald Trump, Sir Elton John. I'm here to ask you a favor.
Oh my gosh, it's Captain Fantastic himself. So much glitter, so many sparkles, so bedazzled.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, I think. When referencing people in your speeches, could you please refrain from using my song titles?
Oh, you mean like when I called Kim Jong-un Rocket Man?
Yes, exactly like that.
Okay,
Yes,
from now on, he's Madman Across the Water. How would you?
Well, you see, I have a problem with that
How
because it's the
about
same
if I
derogatory...
call Tulsi Gabbard the Island Girl?
I know, Tulsi, and I don't think she
Ben
would
Carson. Ben Carson is Honky Cat. That's all.
You can't call Ben Carson honky cat. That would be racist.
Why?
Ben Carson's black.
You know, I never noticed he was black at all. I never noticed that. It's funny that somebody like you, Elton John, would point that out to me.
Well, I don't...
All right, fine. From now on, he's Benny and the Jets.
Well, I suppose that's...
Benny and the Jets.
Yes, when Nancy Pelosi inevitably decides to have another round of impeachment, could you please refrain from saying the bitch is back?
It doesn't matter what she says. I'm still standing.
I suppose I'm just going to have to live with that. Fine. If you don't want to help, I'm out of here.
Go on, get out. Hit the yellow brick road so fast and hard. Get out.
Oh, and one more thing, Don Trump. The lyric goes, hold me closer, tiny dancer, not hold me close with tiny hands, sir. Thank you.
Go on, get him out of here. Get him out of here. Let's see. Rhymes with impeachment.
Hi, Tom. Gee, you look terrible.
I feel terrible. Achy, fevery, nauseous.
Ooh, that's too bad. You know, you ought to...
Chills, stuffiness, bloating.
Yeah, you know...
Scratchy, gassy, drippy.
I know! Say, Tom, you should try Wearaflu.
Wearaflu?
Wearaflu is the only medication that actually takes your flu symptoms and hides them at various places inside your body, so that by the time your body finds them all, your flu is gone. In the meantime, you're back to work.
You were right, Ed. Wearaflu lets me ignore my flu symptoms and gets me back to work. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and infecting the rest of the office.
Come out wherever you are with Wearaflu. Take as directed.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of F&A Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us, F&A.
Hey, we got the best crust.
F&A.
We got the best cheese.
F&A.
We got the best sauce.
F&A, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
F&A.
Yeah, you got that right. F&A.
F&A Pizza on the corner of Hill Yeah Avenue and Dam Straight Street.
And ladies and gentlemen, back to your host of Jimmy at the Crossroads, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Great to be with you here on Jimmy at the Crossroads in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Such a pleasure and a privilege. Thanks for joining us today. By the way, if you haven't subscribed on the YouTube channel, please do. YouTube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. And by the way, let me share first here that we have a new website up, jimmyatthecrossroads.com. It is up and running. All sorts of content. You can access all the past videos when I have columns. They're going up and more. jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Please log on and check it out. All right. I want to talk for a few minutes about Michael Flynn. This is the Lieutenant General, now retired, who was tapped to be National Security Advisor prior to President Trump taking office. The president took office. Flynn became National Security Advisor despite former President Barack Obama advising against it. Flynn ultimately was fired after having lied to the FBI and after having lied to the Vice President, Mike Pence. Now, when it comes to the FBI, that lie, so it wasn't perjury, by the way. Just keep that in mind when we play an Obama clip in a bit. But it was lying to the FBI. However, it was based on an investigation that had no reasonable or justifiable basis, and they completely baited him into it. It literally was, even though it wasn't technically perjury, a perjury trap. And what's so stunning about this story is not just the timeline of how it all unfolded, but the players who'd been involved in this whole thing. In the Wall Street Journal, there was a great piece end of last week entitled "The Mueller Cover-Up" by Kimberly Strassel. And this was actually read on Friday at the press conference held by Kayleigh McEnany, the new press secretary for President Trump. She read parts of it, and I encourage folks to check it out because it really walks through the timeline of how it went about this investigation, including Carter Page and the surveillance warrant from FISA that they never should have gotten at the FBI from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. We know about all the issues of the FISA situation. But also, she walks through the involvement of Michael Flynn. So be sure to check that out. But I don't want to rehash that. So much as to say that what we learned last week was particularly stunning. Jerry Dunleavy at the Washington Examiner, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, had a news report that lays out how Sally Yates, former Deputy Attorney General, learned of the Flynn targeting. Now, Sally Yates was the former Deputy Attorney General, as I mentioned, and she was fired in 2017 by the Trump administration, by President Trump, for not moving forward with a defense of his travel ban in court. She felt, no, I don't like this, so I'm not going to defend it in court. And Trump essentially said, you're gone then if you're not going to defend my order in court. I'm the President of the United States. You're supposed to defend my policy. You didn't. I'm going to toss you. She's no fan. Keep this in mind. She is no fan, Sally Yates, of Donald Trump. Now, as Dunleavy reports, newly released documents indicate former FBI Director James Comey kept his superior at the Justice Department in the dark about the Bureau's investigation into retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates told Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team that she first learned the FBI possessed and was investigating recordings of Flynn's late 2016 conversations with a Russian envoy following a January 5th, 2017 national security meeting at the White House. It wasn't Comey who told her, but former President Barack Obama. Yates, who was briefly the acting attorney general during the early days of the Trump administration before getting fired, and I should have clarified that she was acting attorney general before she was fired, also laid out how in the ensuing days, Comey kept the FBI's actions cloaked in secrecy and repeatedly rebuffed her suggestions that the incoming Trump team be made aware of the Flynn recordings. Now, these recordings they're talking about were conversations that Michael Flynn had with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. And they had tapped him, in essence, and were tracking those phone conversations. These revelations, the Dunleavy report in the Washington Examiner goes on, appeared in declassified FBI interview notes of the Mueller team's conversation with Yates in August 2017. Highlighted by the Justice Department on Thursday as U.S. Attorney for D.C. Timothy Shea moved to drop its criminal charges against Flynn. To quote Attorney General Barr from his interview on CBS News, as Dunleavy does, One thing people will see if they look at the documents is how Director Comey purposely went around the Justice Department and ignored Deputy Attorney General Yates. Deputy Attorney General Yates, I've disagreed with her about a couple things, but you know, here she upheld the fine tradition of the Department of Justice. She said that the new administration has to be treated just like the Obama administration, and they should go and tell the White House about their findings. And you know, Director Comey ran around that. So in other words, Sally Yates at the time was going to be acting Attorney General. And what did she do? She had a meeting with President Obama at the time, still January 5th, Vice President Joe Biden, James Clapper, James Comey, all these heavy hitters we kept hearing come up over the course of the Russia investigation, some of whom are on cable news heralded as experts by CNN and MSNBC on these very stories of the Russia probe, for example. They were all in this meeting. They leave. Most of them leave. Except Obama has Yates and Comey stay behind. And Obama, not Comey, Obama brings up Flynn, and Yates is shocked. According to Yates, quote, Obama started by saying he had learned of the information about Flynn and his conversation with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Obama specified he did not want any additional information on the matter, but was seeking information on whether the White House should be treating Flynn any differently. Don't tell me more. I got a general idea. Should we treat this guy differently? But don't tell me more, please. I got enough information, and I want you to continue looking into this. Then, lo and behold, on Friday, audio is uncovered of former President Barack Obama speaking via phone to the Obama Alumni Association, talking about how the Justice Department has wrongfully dropped charges against Flynn. So to be clear, they went to Judge Sullivan, the judge in the case, and said, we think you should drop the charges. The judge, as of this broadcast, has not yet ruled on that request by the Department of Justice. But here is Barack Obama, who again had that meeting, talking about the dropping of these charges.
The news over the last 24 hours, I think, has been somewhat downplayed about the Justice Department dropping charges against Michael Flynn. And the fact that there is no precedent that anybody can find for someone who's been charged with perjury just getting off scot-free. That's the kind of stuff where you begin to get worried that basic, not just institutional norms, but our basic understanding of rule of law is at risk. And you know, when you start moving in those directions, it can accelerate pretty quickly, as we've seen in other places. So I am hoping that all of you feel the same sense of urgency that I do. Whenever I've campaigned, I've always said, this is the most important election, especially, obviously, when I was on the ballot. That always feels like it's the most important election. This one, I'm not on the ballot, but I am pretty darn invested. We got to make this happen.
Once again, I hear something in that phone call recording. I hear something I remarked on about the video of Obama endorsing Joe Biden for President of the United States. Something that I have seen throughout my observations of Barack Obama as President of the United States during his 8-year tenure. This is another example of how Barack Obama is the epitome of self-righteousness. He is the epitome of what it means to be sanctimonious and to be self-important. Flynn was not charged with perjury. He was charged with lying to the FBI. Yes, shouldn't do that. But he was charged with lying to the FBI on January 24th, 2017, not under oath, which is what perjury is, lying under oath, in what was clearly an orchestrated setup for Flynn. This was nearly 20 days after Obama's meeting in the Oval Office. It is something to see, or hear in this case, Barack Obama talk about the rule of law being eroded. Here's Sally Yates. It was not clear when the president first received the information, that is about Flynn, relative to this January 5th meeting of Obama, Yates, and Comey. She was so surprised by the information she was hearing that she was having a hard time processing it and listening to the conversation at the time. These are notes from the Mueller report. So surprised by the information was this Deputy Attorney General, who's no fan of Donald Trump. Remember, she was fired because she didn't want to defend what she thought was an order that she shouldn't defend in court, which was the travel ban. And yet, Barack Obama has the audacity to talk about rule of law. I know he wrote a book called The Audacity of Hope, but man, is this audacious. But that is Barack Obama. Always the man in the right. Always the man who has moral superiority. You know who else has moral superiority? Former Deputy FBI Director Andy McCabe. Let's play this clip. Cut 3. Andrew McCabe on CNN being asked to talk about this, dropping of the charges or request by the DOJ to do so.
Absolutely no limit to what this Attorney General will do, please the President of the United States.
Now, the President himself responded to this yesterday with a statement that I think he was referring to you and others who were in the FBI at that time. So listen.
He was targeted by the Obama administration, and he was targeted in order to try and take down a president. And what they've done is a disgrace, and I hope a big price is going to be paid. I hope a lot of people are going to pay a big price because they're dishonest, crooked people. They're scum, and I say it a lot. They're scum. They're human scum.
I want to give you a chance to respond to that, Andy.
Sure. You know, I won't respond to his language. The president debases himself and reduces himself every day by, saying disgusting things about people. And in this case, saying disgusting things about people who dedicated their lives to protecting this country and their fellow citizens. That's all horrendous, and we're unfortunately used to that by now. But I would point out that General Flynn was not targeted. He was properly investigated in a well-predicated case, a case whose validity has been proven not just by those of us.
That is patently false, and he knows it. He knows it as well as anybody possibly could. But you listen to it. Oh, that's Donald Trump talking about people who've dedicated their lives to this country. Dedicated their lives. He means James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and the rest, who talked about an insurance policy. Against President Trump or Donald Trump becoming president of the United States. You listen to the rhetoric, the language used by Andy McCabe, and it charts well with James Comey, the Boy Scout, and Barack Obama, the paragon of morality and ethical behavior as president of the United States. The only reason, by the way, where people don't say, oh, Barack Obama was a corrupt president, he didn't have scandals, is because they didn't cover the scandals. They didn't get nearly the kind of attention that they should have gotten. But the bottom line here is that the media is trying to provide as much cover for the Obama team that goes right to the top now, we know, with Barack Obama, then President of the United States, after an election with Donald Trump, incoming president, doesn't give a heads up to Trump. Yeah, he says you shouldn't make Flynn National Security Advisor, but he didn't say this stuff. He didn't tell him that his administration was spying on incoming members of the next administration. Well, why wouldn't he do that? And then what is even worse is not only how Obama is being disingenuous, and Andy McCabe and James Comey, who even said if there was a more organized White House, I wouldn't have been able to get away with this. We see people in the media who are absolutely trying to discredit those who are shining light on this. Real quick, before we wrap up here, let's play cut 4. Brian Stelter on CNN complaining about how Republicans and right-wing media are actually covering this story.
It's so disappointing to look at what we're seeing from right-wing media these days, where there's such an obsession with the deep state and these revelations about the Russia probe and the decision about Michael Flynn. They're treating the Michael Flynn story like it's a bigger deal than the deaths of 2,000 Americans a day. You know, we're seeing this on Fox and Friends and other shows. When the president called into Fox and Friends the other morning, Friday morning, right before the unemployment rate numbers came out, he talked about the Flynn case for 20 minutes before he was asked about the pandemic. In what right mind is any scandal, any political scandal, any Department of Justice story more important to ask the president about than the pandemic that's raging? Look, ultimately that's about news judgment. It's about lack of judgment. But I find it befuddling that some people are acting like this death toll is just normal and accepted and common and just another day.
Okay, so that's Brian Stelter. Look, the reality is Brian Stelter is one of the guys who was consistently out there beating the drum about the Michael Flynn case, about the Mueller report and Russiagate. The media was obsessed with it. We were then dealing with impeachment proceedings in January when maybe Congress should have been a little bit more focused on the potential pain that the pandemic we're now facing was going to bring. He acts like we should cover the accusations, the allegations, the arrest, but not cover the unethical behavior of the prior administration and the FBI. That you shouldn't give equal coverage to that, or that the president shouldn't be outraged at what happened to his first national security advisor and what happened to his campaign during the 2016 elections. Obama's a hell of a guy to talk about rule of law when his administration flaunted the rule of law all the time. And that's the reality of the Obama administration that we're not hearing very often. Because people don't want you to recall that or know about that. But this is an example already here. And then he's saying a rule of law, and he's got the facts wrong. Michael Flynn was not charged with perjury. He was lying to the FBI at a meeting that was not under oath. But this is what Obama is and does. And it's something we thought we were done with, but apparently not. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Good to be with you here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. We are overdue for a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Crista Huff, Chief Analyst of Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor. Here on the show, we're going to dive into a topic of interest with regards to the whole housing market and also the stock market and what we're seeing there. So keep it right here. We'll be back. Jimmy at the Crossroads. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program for a very important presidential message.
I have an issue that's very important right now to the American people and to the people of the United States as well. Our jobs are disappearing to Mexico. I'm going to change that in 2021 when I'm reelected. These jobs are gone. Even the Keebler Cookie Company is no longer, it's in Mexico, folks. It's down in Mexico so far. And those elves are out of a job. Our elves are out of, they don't even speak Spanish. They can't go down there, and they have Mexican elves down there now who don't even understand English making these cookies. I'm going to read the new ingredients just so you're interested. Honey, check. Wheat, check. Oats, check. Sugar, of course. But here's where it gets strange. Chicharrones. What's chicharrones? Jalapeno peppers, folks. If you try these cookies, you're going to burn your tongue off. It'll be gone. You'll have nothing. You won't be able to speak Spanish or English or any other language. I'm going to bring those elves back so quick and so much. They're going to love it. You're going to have your cookies back, and your tongue's going to be fine, believe me. Trump 2020, thank you very much.
So these are the auditions for guest host of my new show, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Please step up and state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phil. You know, every pancake has two sides, and we're going to get to the other side of that pancake when we come back from the break.
Mr. Shatner.
Bernie Sanders will probably be the Democratic nominee.
You're going to have to talk faster.
I was going at full speed.
Kelsey Grammer.
Very well. I'll send you all to heaven before condemning you to hell. My little snowy flake, poor little snowy flake, triggered in every way.
President Bill Clinton, whenever you're ready.
Hey, how y'all doing? So, how about we play a little game of the old switcheroo?
Thank you.
Hey, if I get the gig, do I get an intern?
Thank you.
Just asking.
Tom Hanks, go ahead, please.
I am Tom Hanks at your service.
Can you try an announcer voice, sir?
Oh, an announcer voice? Oh, come on. I got a lot of movies to do. Okay, I'll do an announcer voice. I am an announcer. I'm the announcer. Ha! How was that? The announcer guy. Ha!
I think we're going to have to do another audition call, guys.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And ladies and gentlemen, back to your host of the Crossroads, Mr. Jimmy Sengenberger.
Thank you. Smooth voice, Nathan Mnuchin, working the Mnuchin magic as producer extraordinaire. Here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, gotta love a nice little jazz tune. As we continue in partnership with the Washington Examiner, thanks for joining us. Be sure, by the way, to subscribe, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Also, log on to the new website, jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Just went up over the weekend. Pretty excited about it. And be sure to go to the Washington Examiner website, washingtonexaminer.com, and follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Of course, I'm at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. Once again, you're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. So great to be with you, and it is time now to check in on the markets, investing topics, and the housing market among them with Crista Huff, Chief Analyst at Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor, good friend of the show, rejoining us here on the program. Crista, welcome back. Good to talk with you on this Monday.
Thanks, Jimmy. Do you hear me just fine?
I do. You're coming in loud and clear. It sounds good. So how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm quarantined. I need a haircut.
I think so many of us need a haircut, and I'm going to try to get one today if I can get in, since they are by appointment. They're allowed now, at least where I live, my neck of the woods here in Colorado. So let me ask you, Crista Huff, the stock market, let's start there. Because on Friday, we got the worst jobs report like I could ever conceive of. Although it wasn't surprising, It was still stunning, sort of a shocking report. 20.5 million jobs lost. We just saw as well, Crista, we saw the labor force participation rate at its lowest level since 1973. I mean, these are bad numbers, but the stock market was up. It was up a bit. Why is that, do you think, and where do you think the market's at now? It's slightly down this morning, at least on the Dow.
I also read this morning Kevin Hassett from the White House Economic Council expects unemployment to get over 20%, which means 1 out of every 5 Americans who wants to work will not be able to find a job. And it's breaking my heart just anticipating it. And to a large extent, the stock market is not anticipating it, which is why the market's going up, even though all this bad news is about to unfold. I think investors tend to be naturally optimistic, and they equate current situations. They try to find past situations that are similar, and then they equate them. So if they say to themselves, well, the market fell in the past and then it rebounded, so they think that this market correction will be similar and that the market will rebound in a similar pattern. But this market correction is completely different from anything that might have happened in the last 30 years. Many of those had to do with financial and corporate excesses and housing market excesses. But this one is about the virus and the business lockdown. And we've never lived through a situation where people were literally told they can't go to work, they can't earn money, they can't sell their products. And so there's a lot of ugliness that's going to unfold as a result of that.
Now, here's the thing, though. I think that there are a lot of investors who might be looking, Crista Huff, at this and see, in their minds, they're thinking, okay, we're going to see worse jobs numbers coming out in the next couple of months. But if we continue to see reopening, and in fact, reopening of the economy starts to expand more and more states, things will start to bounce back more quickly. So maybe that's why they're thinking more optimistically, is that finally we're starting to see a lot of states that are beginning the reopening process. And so if that happens, I mean, I argued earlier on the show that if we can get things reopened more quickly, the recovery will start sooner than later. Whereas if the if the reopening is delayed for an extended period of time longer, then it will take quite a bit longer for things to bounce back. And I think maybe a lot of investors are erring on the side of things will bounce back more quickly because the reopening's starting.
All right, well, let's think about some industries where things will not bounce back like that.
Please.
You have the theater industry. I was talking to a theater CEO yesterday who was talking about various citywide and national theater organizations that won't be reopening until December or the next March, almost a year from now. So all the people in those industries will not be earning any money until their shows start up again. I was reading yesterday that the hospitality industry, which includes hotel and food workers, about 50% of them are expected to permanently lose their jobs right now. We already know that there's been devastation in the oil and energy industry, and we can just keep, airlines, we can keep picking industries and saying, wow, this is ugly, and yes, business is going to reopen, but how quickly is everybody going to get back onto an airplane? It's not going to happen. It's going to happen very slowly, which means they're not going to recall all of the laid off employees. They'll recall 10% of them or 30% of them, but an awful lot of them will run out of personal assets to pay their bills. They're going to be stuck figuring out, okay, which bills do I not pay? Do I need to sell my house and move in with my mom? Even entire families are going to have to make those decisions, because if you don't have money to pay your bills, you can't stay in the house that you're in. So the situation's ugly, and I'm sorry to say that, and it's breaking my heart.
So then where do you see the stock market headed? How long until investors start to come to this notion of what you're presenting, that maybe there's a lot more trouble on the horizon?
Well, I think investors might find out in the next, let's say by the end of June, as cities reopen, and all of the closed, permanently closed signs start going up on the bakeries and the hair salons and all the small businesses that couldn't afford to stay open anymore. And people are going to be shocked. They're going to be like, I thought businesses was going to reopen, because there are a lot of people who have been refusing to believe that the economy is in for a really rough patch. They have been refusing to believe that everybody's not going to go back to work, but it's going to be in their face in June when they walk down Main Street and see 6, stores boarded up that have been around for 20 to 80 years in their towns. So what I've been telling people all year is, A, we're going to have a big stock market correction, which happened, and B, the stock market is going to be in a trading range all year. So yeah, it's really nice that it's been on an uptrend recently, but then expect it to continue to go down and up and down and up as more and more bad news comes out. Anyone who has a lot of profit right now from investing in March and April, God bless you, but keep in mind that the market could fall right back down to the March lows.
Crista Huff, Chief Analyst at Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor, our guest. And normally you're pretty optimistic, so I think this is the most pessimistic I've heard you, Crista. But there are always opportunities for investors in the market, even during difficult times. So here's the question. Where are you seeing those opportunities?
Okay. First of all, the companies that make technology products, the hardware, the software, the improvements within the technology products like NVIDIA and Netflix, everything that comes through your iPhone, your television, those stocks have mostly been thriving since the downturn. And that's because even when people are stuck at home, even when they're unemployed, they've still got their television, they've still got their computer, their phone, they're playing computer games on the computer, and so they might be investing in NVIDIA, which makes computer games look more realistic, for example. And they're investing in Netflix. Netflix is making lots of money because people are sitting at home watching movies, right? So anything technology-oriented has turned out to be a pretty good investment during this downturn. Conversely, I have been buying put options on airlines because as businesses reopen, that's when it's really going to be in our face that people are not getting back on airplanes to any degree that they formerly did. Those companies had to borrow a ton of money. Their balance sheet situations are ugly, and we're going to get worse bad news after the second quarter reports come out for airlines, which will be somewhere around, let's say, I think late July is when airlines will report. So those are two examples of industries that I would love or hate right now.
Crista Huff, one more question on the stock market before we shift for a few minutes to the housing market. Just explain for folks who may not be very attuned to stock investing the difference between puts and calls, because you mentioned put options.
Goodness.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Right. An option. Okay, so if a stock means you own a little piece of a company, an option means you're betting on the stock. So if you think that Netflix is going to go up, you buy a call option. A call means basically it's bullish. Okay, so you're buying a call. And if you think Netflix is going to go down and you want to bet on it, you buy a put. And as the stock goes down, your put goes up in value. So I have been buying puts on airlines, and I'm making money on them. And basically, when Warren Buffett announced that he cashed in 4 airlines, and that was like 2 weekends ago, I learned that was a very big deal. Warren Buffett owned just under 10% of 4 major airlines: United, Southwest, Delta, and American Airlines. So I looked at all of their balance sheet situations, and American Airlines has a horrendous amount of debt, and that was prior to the current, any money they might have borrowed regarding the COVID virus. So basically, a company that has a lot of debt is very similar to a person having a lot of debt, and then they lose their job, right? Like, oh no, they're in a bad situation. So I bought put options on American Airlines, and then the other one I bought puts on was Southwest Airlines, because even though they have a very low amount of debt, they had a very bearish price chart. It was just going down, 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 down. And in the stock market, the momentum just continues. So I bet against Southwest.
So it's sort of making your own prediction. This is what's going to happen with a particular stock, and I'm going to place a bet on it. I'm going to sort of gamble that I'm going to make money off of a put or a call, depending on what it is. Excellent explanation, Crista Huff. Again, Chief Analyst at Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor. Let's switch over to the housing market for a moment, particularly when it comes to baby boomers. Okay, boomers, we've got some issues to talk about here. You wrote a piece last November about the next housing crash and how it's closer than you think. And then now we have this crisis situation where a heck of a lot of baby boomers are out of work. Their retirement prospects are much more challenging now. They may have to sell their homes in this market. What did you notice then, and what are you noticing now?
Okay. Last summer, I was doing some housing market research, and it sort of solidified thoughts that I had already had. I was just imagining, you've got the baby boomers and then the silent generation, even older than them. And as people get older, they downsize. They don't need the huge house that they raise their children in. And frankly, it's a lot of upkeep. And as you get older, you get tired. You just don't have as much energy to clean the darn house and to do the landscaping. Or maybe you have the energy, but your knee goes out, because your knees are one of the first things that go out as you get older. That happens in your 30s. So imagine being 70 with a bad knee. Well, once you've got bad knees, you don't want to go upstairs to bedrooms. You don't want to go down to the basement for the laundry room and such. So you naturally get rid of the large house with multi-levels, and you go to a one-level smaller home that's easier to maintain and easier to get around. So first, you've got all these older people who are naturally selling big homes and moving to warmer places with smaller homes. And now let's fast forward. You have possibly up to 20% of American workers being unemployed because of the coronavirus lockdown and the continuing layoffs and bankruptcies. I mean, we're hearing about those every single day. So as people are unemployed, they don't have money to pay their bills. So first they're going to go through all their savings. Then they're going to cash in their 401k, IRAs, and they're going to spend that. And they're still running out of money. And so, Mark and Nancy say to each other, this is really expensive maintaining this house. Maybe we should go live in my mom's basement for a while and save this extra $3,400 a month that was going to all these different bills. And Mark and Nancy yeah, let's call mom and let's do that. And they put the house on the market. So a rash of unemployment will naturally lead to a lot of people selling homes, and the homes on the market will depress prices because it's going to be a buyer's market.
You know what's depressing about that? Well, everything is depressing about that. But one thing that just come to my mind as a millennial, there are a heck of a lot of millennials who probably just got out of their parents' basements. And now they're looking at, well, maybe I need to go into my parents' basement again. And of course, that's the younger side of things. But maybe that will help some of the boomers keep their homes.
I think we're going to see a long-term trend now of families living together, multi-generational, much more so than ever before, simply because the individuals are not finding the excellent corporate jobs that they used to have that paid for their apartment. So like if my apartment costs $2,000 a month, the first figure $36,000 a year that I earn goes for taxes and rent, and that's just for an apartment. So you need a job that pays, figure at least $20,000 more a year than that, so figure $56,000 a year, so that you can pay for other things like, more taxes and food and healthcare, et cetera. So you've got all these people who are, let's say, retail workers, right? Well, retail workers aren't earning $56,000 a year, and neither are food workers, and so many different kinds of workers. So you can't afford to live on your own like you might have previously. And so
And what's so sad about this too is that finally we were seeing wage gains noticeably in this economy, Crista Huff, where you were seeing those lower end workers, in particular, the greatest gains when it comes to take home pay were happening for the bottom quartile. And now they're being hit even harder than anybody else.
Yeah. One of the problems, in society was we became this lifestyles of the rich and famous kind of society. And people weren't saving money, and instead they were paying money for all kinds of silly things like, pardon me, but manicures and fake eyelashes. Like, if you don't have any savings in the bank, what the heck are you doing with manicures and fake eyelashes and trips to Hawaii, right? The entire point of having savings in the bank is so that when you lose a job, unexpectedly, which is exactly what the coronavirus was, you have a cushion so you don't have to immediately panic. I mean, we know of some people who became very depressed and desperate just by losing their job, let alone not having work for 10 months, right? So, so maybe this will do a reset on Americans and the way we look at money and whether we save and are more prudent with it.
Very interesting points, as always. Crista Huff, Chief Analyst at Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor. Always great to get your thoughts here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Again, Crista Huff joining us, Chief Analyst, Cabot Undervalued Stocks Advisor. Time to take a break. When we come back, I'm looking forward to talking with August Turek, who spent time with the Trappist monks, which are an order of the Catholic Church. Very interesting observations, lessons of the Catholic Church from these monks when it comes to the lessons for business and for how we can get out of this economic malaise, how businesses should handle it. So we will talk with August Turek here in just a little bit on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Stay tuned.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Jimmy Sengenberger here, and I'm going to tell you something personal about myself. 8 years out of college, just about, I still have $16,000 in student loan debt, and I've had several forbearances along the way. But here's the thing. I don't think that you should have to forgive my student loan debt. In 1990, the year that I was born, student loan debt in the USA totaled $20 billion, with the average graduate coming out of school with $9,000 in debt. Now today, the total is $1.5 trillion across the country, with the average being $37,000 for a typical graduate. We've talked about the reasons why this 30 years of growth has happened in another video.
Are you worried about college tuition and how you're going to pay for it? Well, come on down to Bill of Goods where we've got the deal for you. Yes, you.
But while a lot of folks are talking about forgiving student loan debt, I think we've got to look at a couple of other ways to do this. First, in the 1970s, Congress essentially eliminated the ability for folks to discharge their student loan debt in bankruptcy. Yes, that means if you're about to default, you cannot discharge your student loan debt in bankruptcy because of something Congress did. Now, this got rid of all sorts of risks to the lenders so they could keep churning out loans, but it also put people who were so deeply indebted in a position that they just couldn't get out of. We need to restore protection for student loan borrowers if you need to discharge in bankruptcy. But for average everyday borrowers, we want to make it easier to pay back the debt more quickly. For example, Senator Cory Gardner, Republican of Colorado, recently introduced the Student Loan Repayment Acceleration Act, a piece of legislation that would provide a quicker way to pay back your debt tax-free.
We have a big problem. Student loan debt is now about $1.5 trillion in the United States. For a person who's just out of college that's trying to start a family, maybe buy a home, simply pay the electricity bills, this kind of relief is going to be significant for them.
One of the things that this legislation would do is enable employers and employees to contribute up to $10,000 a year together to pay back student loan debt. This is a great way, tax-free, to get this process going much more quickly. You see, we don't need to just be looking at forgiveness of student loan debt as though that's the only way to address this. Through bankruptcy protection in Senator Gardner's bill, among other solutions, there really are better ways to do it, and we can persuade millennials to that effect.
And folks, let's get back to your host of the Crossroads, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Good to be with you here on Monday, May 11th. Thanks for joining us on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program. Pleasure and a privilege as always. Want to join into the festivities? Please feel free to tweet at me at SangCenter. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. Nathan's going to throw up that lower third so you can see and remember. You can also contact me. 2 ways to do that now. Of course, there's my website, jimmysengenberger.com. Remember, there's no A, there's no I, there's no U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. JimmySengenberger.com, as well as the brand new website for the show. Check it out, JimmyAtTheCrossroads.com, and be sure as well to follow our partners at the Washington Examiner on their website, WashingtonExaminer.com, as well as on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, too. YouTube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. So, boy, oh boy, are we in some times to be sure. And I want to draw your attention, because we didn't have a show on Friday, to the push for vote by mail. I had an op-ed in the Washington Examiner on Friday. And in it, I talked about the push for vote by mail nationwide. We're hoping to have this week Ken Blackwell on the show. We were trying for him last week. We had some technical issues, so we're looking forward to bringing him on later this week. Former Secretary of State for Ohio, as well as a board member for an international elections organization. I want to delve a little deeper into this. So, vote by mail, there's a big push by Democrats for vote by mail right now, particularly because of what we're seeing with the coronavirus pandemic, or so they say. The coronavirus pandemic is a very challenging situation across the country. Lives are being lost. Nearly 80,000 American lives, according to the federal government, being lost. In addition, what we're seeing in terms of the vote by mail situation is that Democrats are looking at this crisis. And they're seeing people across the country wondering about voting by mail because they don't want to go out to the polls. And so there is a big push by Democrats to make this happen. They say it's simply because of the coronavirus pandemic. I don't know that that's true, what their motivations are. But in my piece for the Washington Examiner, Beware the Push for a Nationwide Vote by Mail Election, I talk about how vote by mail is a system we have here in Colorado. We've had it since 2013. And it's worked pretty well overall in this state. We still have some issues. Voter ID requirements not very strong, particularly compared to the, not compared to, but when you're looking at same-day voter registration. Same-day voter registration presents challenges when you don't have an ID system that is completely buttoned up. So that's one thing that Colorado needs to work on. But in a state like this one, which is one of 5 states now to have all mail ballots, or at least ballots where you get them in the mail. Doesn't mean everybody's going to vote by mail. You could do vote centers, for example, And you could do ballot drop-offs. That's what I do on Election Day. I wait till Election Day every year to drop off my ballot. Okay, last election in 2019, was it 2018, or maybe it was both. I dropped it off the day before. But basically, I went ahead and cast my vote, ballot drop-off. That's what I did. And so you don't have to just put it in the mail. There's a misconception about that. But then also, when you're looking at vote by mail, it reduces costs significantly. There is a noticeable cost reduction. So that's a positive. However, it is far from perfect, and the idea that it's going to bring out more voter turnout isn't necessarily and noticeably the case. In fact, evidence is scant that voter turnout is necessarily and noticeably higher than in person, believe it or not. States like Colorado, as I said, have issues with voter ID requirements being insufficient, particularly with the availability of same-day voter registration. You do also have challenges for vote centers that are in rural and mountainous areas of states. They may run into bandwidth problems and connectivity issues. Also, ballot harvesting can be perilous for election integrity. Now, on balance, I look at the system. In Colorado, we were the third state to do it. Oregon in 1998 voted. Then Washington in 2011 or so implemented it. Colorado approved it in 2013. And then Utah and Hawaii, over time, their counties made individual moves to do so. And it's worked well. And election issues have benefited, or rather, elections via vote by mail have benefited both Republicans and Democrats. That is to say, Republicans have performed well in some, Democrats have performed well in others. Really, the national mood and voter registration numbers are much more significant than anything to do with vote by mail. So let's keep that in mind as people say, oh, this is really going to help significantly. But here's the big problem with vote by mail. As I write for the Washington Examiner, Democrats are fooling themselves if they think state systems can be completely revamped in a matter of months. As former Colorado Secretary of State Wayne Williams pointed out on this very program recently, it took a decade for Colorado to get ready for vote-by-mail elections. Likewise, for Oregon and Washington. Admittedly, those three states were pioneers, so others can follow their lead and learn from their experiences. But the inherent complexities are inescapable. For example, electronic poll books and accurate databases must be properly generated with verifiable voter signatures. Voting centers and ballot counting locations need to have strong broadband connectivity and a system that can handle the load. Election judges must be trained and thoroughly understand how to adapt to a new system. Moreover, a one-size-fits-all approach that just lumps all the states together is doomed to fail. Each state has unique circumstances that must be taken into account. And as Matt Crane, former clerk of Arapahoe County, Colorado, observed to me, quote, states that are currently below 20% mail will have a very challenging time duplicating the Colorado model in 6 months. However, there's a lot they can do to encourage more absentee voting and remove barriers to that process. It's unfortunate, Matt Crane tells me, that it's taken an emergency to get some states to move on this. Then there's also the issue of election integrity. It's absolutely critical. While fraud generally isn't more likely under a vote-by-mail system, contrary to what some say, there's not enough evidence that I've seen and that experts I've talked to, particularly here in Colorado, where we've done this for years now, that fraud increases, voter fraud, when you have vote-by-mail. It still would be the case under rushed vote by mail. If you're rushing to make a shift nationwide, States will probably be incapable of swiftly and effectively establishing massive, reliable databases where both voter IDs and signatures can be cross-referenced easily and efficiently. The number of provisional ballots, that is when you have a ballot issue, you give someone a provisional ballot, and then you deal with it after the fact, and then count the ballot, that number could be astronomical, likely contributing to nationwide lawsuits that would make hanging chads, remember hanging chads in the 2000 election? Would make hanging chads blush. And finally, former Colorado Deputy Secretary of State Suzanne Steyer notes that mail ballot printers are, quote, single points of failure with too few printers. As she told me, quote, we had problems every year. For example, in 2016, we had 1.1 million ballots held in a printer dispute over a die cutter. One printer literally locked out another printer. Vote by mail itself, as I closed in the Washington Examiner, may be a good idea. I think it is overall. But not if it's rushed. If the entire country made the switch for November 2020, as Democrats insist, printers will become the new ventilators. Electoral confidence will crater, and Vladimir Putin will smile. If Democrats are truly worried about election integrity, remember, Russians interfering in our elections dominated 3 years plus of Democratic rhetoric as they refused to accept that Hillary Clinton actually lost legitimately, fair and square, to Donald Trump. If they're legitimately concerned about election integrity, they will not push to rush to vote by mail across the country. The lawsuits, you can't begin to imagine the number of lawsuits that we will see. The number of issues and challenges. Not enough printers to deal with the ballot. So you were worried about ventilators, Democrats, states competing for ventilators? Never happened. Never really got to that point where there were ventilator shortages. Same thing with N95 masks. But nevertheless, you were worried about it. Well, are you really wanting elections to suffer those kinds of... Because that's what's going to happen. Ballot printers, there are not enough of them. And that's one of many problems with rushing this. Do it thoughtfully. Expand it. Take initiatives. But just because of this pandemic doesn't mean that you can get away with making such a dramatic shift. It is striking to think about how much of a full-throated effort the Democrats are trying to do here. How they want to have it be in the next CARES package, the next so-called stimulus bill, would have this as a central focus. It's a nice idea in theory and in practice if done over a period of time. Again, it took Colorado a decade. Can't rush this thing. Later this week, we'll talk with former Ohio Secretary of State Ken Blackwell and get his thoughts on all of this. Well, that is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks so much for joining us on the program. We will be back tomorrow working on what should be a debate about reopening the state and so much more. Very excited for what's to come over the course of this week here on the show that brings you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Good work to Nathan Mnuchin, producer extraordinaire, as well as the Washington Examiner. Much appreciation to our partners there. And to you for watching. Please check out the new website, jimmyatthecrossroads.com, washingtonexaminer.com, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/jimmyatthecrossroads. Have a great day, stay healthy and well, and God bless America.